Hello everyone, welcome to the Gig Economy. I'm Bill Inman. I'll be speaking next week at the ICMI conference in Long Beach. It's a specialized conference for contact center and call center professionals, and there'll be thousands of people. It's held every year. The title of my presentation there is Winning the War for Quality Temp Talent, How to Reduce Costs, Improve Quality, and Stay Compliant. So I have a couple slides from that presentation on the growth of the gig economy that I thought would be worth sharing with you in this episode. One of the slides has a picture of Henry Ford's plant in 1916 and another picture of what is basically a coffee house here in 2016. And I think that these pictures say a lot about the gig economy and where it's going and where it's been. In 1916, we had a shift in labor from an agrarian society to a more industrial society that was amplified and accelerated by Henry Ford. Not only the creation of the Model T and everything he was doing to kind of push the automotive industry forward, but even more so with the moving assembly line. Once Henry Ford created the moving assembly line, he was able to drive the cost down to about a third what it took to produce the Model T from what it was before the moving assembly line. Now in the picture at the top, you'll see the thousands of workers who were working at the Ford assembly plant in 1916 in Dearborn, Michigan. As I mentioned, not only was it important for the automotive industry, but work was changed during that time. And the way work was performed back then is a lot different than what the gig economy is shaping up to be in this century. Work was performed essentially in this picture, as you can see, at one location. Everybody worked together. You worked in a job for an extended period of time. The way that companies utilized the workers was they had them all centralized in this one location. And it's a very different environment in the gig economy today. Additionally, the work arrangement during that time frame was you work hours, I'll cut you a paycheck. You need to be here during certain hours, and if you're not, we'll fire you, or worse. The macro factors affecting society was kind of this big shift from an agricultural society when everybody was, or many people were, essentially entrepreneurs. Either they were farmers and had their own business, or they had some other kind of business where they sold something to their community, and then they shifted to working for somebody else, whether it be Andrew Carnegie in steel, or here Henry Ford, for example, in automotive. So the macro factors was this big shift away from rural environments to more of city work and city living. The picture below kind of exemplifies more of what today's gig economy is like. How work is performed is a lot looser than it was even 20, 30 years ago. Companies are now more open to letting people work from home or work remote, performing work in a remote environment. The way that companies are utilizing work, especially in the gig economy, is becoming more and more on a project basis. Not so much, you need to be here in the office, we need you here to perform the tasks that are given to you on a daily basis. Now people are handed a deliverable or a project, and they complete that project and they get paid. And the work arrangement is becoming a lot different than getting paid for hourly work. Now workers are getting paid for the work they perform. Sometimes they're paid in stages, sometimes they're paid after work is performed, and sometimes they're still paid hourly as a temporary and contract labor worker is paid these days. The macro factors today, as opposed to 1916, are obviously we live in a much more global society, and that global workforce is continuing to drive down labor costs. It's continuing to affect workers in the U.S., but the way that the world is now is much more global, project-based, and of course the internet has helped to accelerate that. The moving assembly line back in 1916 was the big innovation. Mobile and the internet now is the big innovation driving work. So in this next slide, you'll kind of see how work arrangements are growing and what sectors they're growing in now in the gig economy. Now what's interesting about this slide is that at the top you can see the types of workers in the gig economy. You have independent contractors, or people who work in particular projects, generally not on a W-2 or paid by an employer. They're self-employed. You'll also see on-call workers. On-call workers are people who, for example, could be Uber taxi drivers. They work when they're needed. They work on a short-term project, and then they don't work on that project or possibly for that employer for an extended period of time or a short period of time. You have temporary help agency workers. These are workers that are supplied by a staffing company. They work generally in short-term assignments. The average temporary labor position in the U.S. pays about $27.50 an hour, and the assignments range from 3 to 4 months. In the darker blue, you have workers that are provided by contract firms, and these are more statement of work or project-based type workers. You'll see that all the segments, more or less, have grown since 1995, 20 years ago, and even 10 years ago. You see significant growth in independent contractors or the self-employed in this particular chart, which is a U.S.-based chart. You'll also see significant growth in workers provided by contract work. So project-based, self-employed labor is becoming, again, a lot more popular than it was during the 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way into the 90s, when people worked at a company for 10, 20, even 30 years, retired, got their gold watch, and didn't really jump around from employer to employer, let alone project to project. I thought that these two slides would be great to share with you on the growth of the gig economy, kind of how we're in this work revolution, this gig revolution, which is similar to the Industrial Revolution and how it changed work. So thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again soon on the gig economy.